Okay, now we're going to render the white glossy objects. What you're going to need for this particular exercise, you're going to start using some markers. We're going to need the C1. We're going to need the C3. We're going to need the C5, the C7, and the C9. Yes, these numbers are all odd numbers, and that is for a reason. Okay. What I'm going to do is, if you look at the cube, we only have 3 visible sides showing. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to show the number 1 side, which for me, number 1 is always on the top. I always want the lighting to come down brightest on number 1. And then you have a number 2 side, which is here, and a number 3 side, which is here. And that represents the 3 different sides of the cube. So when I refer to number 1, I mean the brightest side. When I refer to number 2, I mean the second brightest side. And number 3 would be the darkest side. Now, with that being said, number 2 and number 3 can sometimes switch depending on which side your shadow is on. If my shadow was on this side, then this would be number 3 and this would be number 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I usually start with the bright side first. Okay, since this is a bright object, the brightest side is on the top, and I really don't need to do a lot of work to that. All I need to do is just do a quick vignette here, and draw a very small horizontal line, a line with a dash. And what that does is that it's holding that top edge for me. Okay, now when I do the number 2 side, I have a particular order that I would like you to follow, and it'll make our lives easier. Here you go. So the first line I'm going to do, I'm just going to make a small indication. This is the number 1. That's my first stroke. Then from the center, I'm going to do my second stroke, which is number 2. The one next to that will be number 3, and number 4, and number 5, number 6, number 7, and number 8. Now, you may give or take 1 or 2 of these strokes. And if I have any space left over, a number 9 at the bottom, just to rule them all. Okay? Now, the reason that I go in this order is that when I'm looking at an object, I'm focusing on the center. So when I build these lines, I want to make sure I have a nice clean edge right at that center first, and then work my way out, because your focal point is here. And I'm going to do the same thing for this side. When I render this, I'm going to start on the top, and then I'm going to work my way from the center all the way back out again, going this way. Okay? So now, for the number 2 side, we're going to be using a number 3. That's a C3 marker. Okay? We can normally do most everything with the broad side, depending on how you use the tip. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to render that big thick line first. And then I'm going to start in the center and try to get that line really nice. And you see that I'm following the order that I indicated. And then if I have space left over, one more line to clean that up. Let me just clean that up right there. Okay, now white objects are very unforgiving, so try not to go over it too many times. We just try to lay them down side by side by side. Okay, now to do the number 3 side, the darkest side, I'm going to be using a C5. Okay. Now notice I'm going to start from the inside out, because I want to try to get that center line a little bit nicer than the other ones. And then one line to rule them all at the bottom. Okay. Okay, so now we've established 1, 2, and 3 side. Now, I know you see marker strokes, but not to worry, okay? These are meant for fast indication pieces. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and do the shadow. Now when I do the shadow, what I'll do is I'll use a number 9, a number 7, and number 5. and I will split this shadow into thirds. Here is a third, here is a third, here is a third. Whatever is closest to the object, I'm going to start with a 9, a 7, and a 5. So let me start with the 9 first. What I'll do is I will do a quick outline. I want to try to color it vertical whenever possible, and do a quick vignette, which is a small indication line. I'm just trying to fill it in vertically, and then indicate a line into the next color, which is the number 5. Do a quick outline on the number 5. And then do a blend. Now, if you feel that your colors aren't blending just yet, you can go over the darker colors. They're much more forgiving than the lighter colors. And just try to clean up your edge. Okay, now, remember we talked about the reflective light. Reflective light was here. It's a mirror of what it sees in the shadow. And since this side was a C5, I'm going to mirror the C5. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick indication here. Sketch in that line, and then I'm going to color in that little section. And what it's showing me is that it is a mirror reflection of what's on the floor. We call it reflective light. Now we're going to use a black Prismacolor pencil to help clean this all up. Okay. Now the only place that we really do see a darker line would be at the bottom of the object. Okay, and we call that the true shadow line. And notice I've gone over it a couple times to give it a little bit of a darkness, thicker line. Okay, now all the other lines that I'm going to be doing we call indication lines. Indication means that it's just a focal point, okay? It's not a real black line, but I'm indicating that there's something there. And I may go over it a couple times because I'm focusing right here in the center. So I want that to be more obvious. My technique is I like to throw a dot here and there just for accent. And then we're going to clean this up a little bit. Okay. Now, I don't want to go heavy on the lines everywhere. I want to indicate. Now, when I indicate, they don't all have to be exactly the same length either. Okay. It's just a little bit of a technique. And we're just going to clean up the edges just a little bit. And that will conclude our rendering for this particular object. Okay.